Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. This is just going to be the next video in the series, following on from what we did with materials, and we're going to quickly look at cameras, so the Cine Camera Actor, and we're also going to have a look at how to keyframe both the camera itself and also any objects that we might want to animate within our scene. Once you get further down the line and we have rigs inside of Unreal Engine, this is the exact same way that we'll also keyframe those rigs for if we want to do character animation. But for now, we'll just do the basics. So let's get into it. So this is the exact same project that we had before, so we've still got some sculpting and our little cube. So the first thing we're going to do is add the Cine Camera Actor. So if we go up to the quick add menu with the little green plus and come down to cinematic, we should find the Cine Camera Actor, short for Cinema Camera Actor. Now, the reason we use the Cine Camera Actor and we don't just use our usual viewport is because the Cine Camera Actor has a lot more settings in it. So if we go over to our details panel on the right hand side, we'll see all these settings for our camera, and they all mimic that of a cinema camera or a generic DSLR camera that you'd also see. So we have things like film back, which is the sensor size, so we can do anything from just a generic 16:9 image to mimicking an IMAX camera, which is shot at 70mm on physical film. So we can mimic any of these settings. We can change the focal length, which is basically our zoom. We've got the aperture, which is changing how our depth of field is going to look and how the focus is going to look, and a lot of other settings as well, which all go into the same sort of realm as a real camera. For now, we're not going to play with any of these. That's going to be a future session where we're going to look at all of the camera settings and also post-processing volumes. So we are going to look at controlling the camera and keyframing it. So once you have added this Cine Camera Actor and it is spawned in your world, we do get a little camera model, which is our representation of where the camera is. So as we can see in the bottom right of the screen, this is basically what our camera is seeing. So while we're selected onto it, we get a little preview. If I deselect it, it goes away. So if I select it again and then start to rotate, this is all well and good, but that's a very, very tiny window, and it would be easier to see everything as the full size. So to do that, I'm going to right click on the camera and go to Pilot Cine Camera Actor, or the shortcut is Control Shift and P on whichever object you're selected on. So if we click on that, our view has changed. So this is now showing us exactly what that Cine Camera Actor is seeing, but we have basically inhabited it. So if I move around, we aren't going to see the camera still floating there. We do get a little visual bug, which is just our transform, but we are actually moving as the camera now. So if I frame it up on this cube, and then I come over to the top left and click on the eject button, which is just a little up arrow with a line underneath it, we can see that our camera has moved. So it's in a completely different place, and that is the easiest way to basically manipulate the camera in its location. And when we are controlling the camera in this pilot view, it's the exact same controls as usual. So holding right click in the viewport and using W, A, S, and D to move around. So let's have a look at how to add some keyframes. So the first thing we need to do is get a sequencer into Unreal Engine. If we come up to the clipboard or clapperboard up at the top and click on it, we should see that we've got Add Level Sequence. Now this is going to add our sequencer, and this is going to allow us to do keyframes. I'm going to click on that. We can call it whatever we want because we might have multiple sequences within the same level. I'm just going to click Save on the default name, and all of a sudden we get this new window pop up at the bottom called Sequencer. Now this is taking up a lot of the screen currently, so we're going to organize this a bit better. We can see that the sequencer has a tab, the same as the content browser and the environment light mixer. So I'm just going to combine all of these by dragging out from the sequencer and putting it right next to that environment light mixer. Awesome. Now we can see the sequencer looks very similar to After Effects. Or, to be honest, most layer-based things that you would animate within. Obviously, After Effects is a 3D program, it's not layer based, but they've gone for the similar sort of design because it's very familiar to people. Now, where we would usually find our layers in the bottom left is currently empty, but we want to be able to see our camera in there. So to do that, we need to come up to our outliner up in the top right and find our Cine Camera Actor. Once we've found it, we can click and drag it all the way to this box in the bottom left. When we let go, all of these camera settings appear and our timeline changes as well. So in these settings, up at the top, you've got camera cuts. Now this will appear whenever you add a camera or something to view through into the sequencer. This is basically giving you a little preview of what is happening over the timeline. And then we can see our Cine Camera Actor, and underneath it, all of its settings. So if you ever can't see any of these settings, but you see a little arrow that is pointing to the right next to a name, if you click on it, that will reveal those settings. Likewise, if you ever want to hide them for organizational purposes, if the arrow is pointing down, you can just click on it and it will hide some settings. So I've hidden the camera component settings for now, because that's not what we're looking at. And we're going to look at the transform settings instead. Under transform, we have location, rotation, and scale. Now, location is basically the same as position within After Effects, but because we're in a 3D space, not just a 2D space, we call it location, because it's a lot easier in a game engine. Now, to add a keyframe, we've got these little plus buttons inside of a little diamond shape, just to the right-hand side of each of the parameters. So we've got one for transform, location, rotation, and scale. So if we wanted to add a keyframe to all three of those values, so location, rotation, and scale, I can just come to the transform and hit keyframe. That's always a good way to start if you know that you're at your exact starting position. And then if we go further along in the timeline, let's say to frame 100, and move our camera somewhere, let's just move it over here for some reason, and then I'm going to hit keyframe on the transform again. And now if we go back to the start and watch it back, there we go, exactly what we expected. That is our camera animation. If we wanted to say change the rotation only of the camera, we could always come down to rotation. If I, let's say, face my camera over this direction, so I see the green cube again, and just hit keyframe on the rotation, and then we watch it back, we can see how it affects that move overall. Now we can even go as far as to move the camera entirely, and then if we only keyframe rotation, it's going to put it back into that same location, but it's going to inherit the rotation values. Now, obviously that looks silly, but sometimes you will find some good use cases for things like this. So sometimes it's easiest to do a fly through of an overall start and end position, get some extra location keyframes in there, and then do all of your rotation, so it's always looking in the right area. But generally, just see it as the same as animating a camera in Maya or animating an object in After Effects. So it's always going to be go to where you want on the timeline, hit keyframe, go to the next position, hit keyframe, etc., etc. A lot of the time, because we're in Unreal Engine, people get confused when it's their first time using it, and they will assume that they can go forwards, move the camera around a lot, and then hit keyframe and think that it will rotate, think that it will record all of that motion. So if we have a look, it does not record all of the motion that you are doing. It goes from point A, point B, point C. It will only take an exact snapshot of where you are, and then it will interpolate in between. If you ever see these weird lines or dots, don't worry, that is just the motion path. So if I come out of the camera and we have a look, it's literally just showing there's keyframe 1, keyframe 2, keyframe 3, and then the line is the sort of path that the camera travels along. Awesome. So that is how we keyframe a camera. Now, if we wanted to, let's say, keyframe an object, we would do it in the exact same way. So we've already got this cube, so let's use the cube as an example. Now, I want to hide some of my camera settings just so I've got some more space. There we go. And now with this cube selected, I can see it in the outliner, the top right. I'm just going to drag and drop it down in the bottom left. And we see we've got those transform options again. So we can do whatever sort of transform we want. For this, I'm just going to do a quick rotation. So if I put some rotation keyframes back at the start, move forward, and then just let's drag all of these up a lot and hit keyframe again. And then if we look through our camera, so we don't always have to right click and go pilot. Once it's in the sequencer, we've got this little icon that says lock cine camera actor to selected viewport, and then we will see through it. And now if we hit play, we've got a bunch of rotation that we can see at the very start. If we drag this along a bit further, see our rotation, then the camera moves. And those keyframes work in exactly the same way. So this one I've only keyframed on rotation, but we could also do the location and scale. And that is really the basics for using the sequencer and getting keyframes in Unreal Engine. So if you're looking to animate a scene, maybe do some pre-visualization or some layout planning, which is basically the early steps of a shot to make sure everything's going to work out. This is a fantastic way to do it. It's super, super quick. And it also means that in Unreal, you can very quickly edit anything around it. So we've keyframed all this, but we could still go in and edit the landscape just on a whim. So hopefully this has been helpful. Again, these are all just fundamental steps in Unreal Engine, and you can use these all the way from doing very basic stuff like what I've shown to doing, I don't know, studio grade stuff in the industry. It's all just the basic steps of adding keyframes. Later on, we will look at the graph editor as well, so that we can see exactly what our keyframes are doing, and we can interpolate between them differently or edit speed, which is a bit more of a professional way of doing it in the industry. But for now, these are the basics. Have a play with it, see what you can get. If you get anything cool, obviously send it to me. I want to see it. But for now, hopefully that's been helpful, and I will see you next time.